learning all of the different components. Andrew covered a lot. We didn't realize just how much he was doing. Okay. All right, Elizabeth, we're ready for you now.
Try this again. Good morning. I'm going to talk about the Brighton Avenue project in Portland. The City of Portland has requested a change of scope and reduction in their project. So just a little background on the Brighton Avenue project. In 2017, the policy committee approved $195,000 to fund a preliminary design report for a Brighton Avenue project. The scope of that project, the project limits were from Rowe Avenue to Dartmouth Street. It included some signal infrastructure upgrades and multimodal improvements and paving of that 1.5 miles, including some ADA improvements as well. At the time of the application, this project was estimated to cost about $4.6 million. And an agreement was executed for PDR and that agreement will expire in September of this year. This project has received some enhanced scoping, but the preliminary design report has not been started. Now, considering the cost estimate in 2017 and has increased since then, is now over $11 million. In 2020, the policy committee decided to approve partial construction funding, knowing that this would need allocations over a few years. And the project received an additional $2 million to the previously approved PDR allocation. There is an ongoing study in this corridor, the PACTS rapid transit study, and it has identified Brighton Avenue as a potential corridor for rapid transit. And without knowing if this corridor will be selected for rapid transit, it would be short-sighted to design and construct multimodal improvements that may be ripped up later. Because of the increasing costs and the uncertainty, the City of Portland has requested a change of scope and reduction. And their letter is attached, attachment 7A, and which shows a schematic of this section. I don't know if Chris, if you could throw something up to kind of show this. What they want to do instead of the entire corridor is to focus on the intersection at Rosemont Corner, which is Brighton Avenue, Woodford Street, Columbia Road.
Sorry, Elizabeth. Yeah, this is the entire corridor as the project exists today, extending from Rowe to Dartmouth about 1.8 miles. And now I'll zoom in as you're talking about the proposal.
Okay, so that the city wants to put a roundabout at a particularly problematic intersection at Rosemont Corner. Just wait for to zoom in. So yeah, it's like a 5-leg intersection, very difficult to move traffic through. I'm sure people are familiar with it. So what the city wants to do is something similar to what they did down at Deering Avenue intersection and put in a roundabout. The cost of a roundabout for Deering Avenue was $1 million to design and construct. And so it's reasonable to expect something at Rosemont Corner. This agenda item, as Tom had mentioned, was presented to the RTEC at their July 11th meeting. And they did approve. I recommend that the policy board approve the requested scope of change, but suggested the staff revisit the list of projects and scores that were submitted in 2017. So table 7.1 is the same table that was in the agenda of the July 20th, 2017 PACTS policy meeting. It depicts all the projects all the projects that were applied for funding. And if you scroll to your table, what you'll see is that the first rated project was this Brighton Avenue project, and it received funding. And the second project was the Yarmouth-Beth Condon Trail. And those are the only 2 projects that received PDR funding. The third rated project was the Portland project in Washington Avenue. So if this project was submitted, that was one of the concerns of an RTEC, is that if this project was submitted as a roundabout, how would it have rated? And it seems that according to this chart that it may have pushed off another Portland project. But I will also note, and we did include the scores for these projects, and that is an attachment in your agenda, attachment 7B. You can see how every project was scored. And at that time, the Washington Avenue project did receive a very similar score, 54, as a Biddeford project. Just want to note that that Biddeford project was resubmitted to PACTS, and it received PDR funding in 2020 and has also recently received earmark funding. Give me a second. So a few other things that I wanted to mention. We did receive some feedback from Maine DOT. They have an email that's included. They do want some additional analysis on this roundabout before they can feel comfortable with it moving forward. That email is also attached in your agenda. That's 7C. And we also attached the alternatives from the PACTS Rapid Transit Study. You can see where those potential alignments fall as well. Last thing I just wanted to mention is that a change in scope and a reduction of the Brighton Avenue project would significantly reduce the liability, financial liability of PACTS, as the proposed roundabout is likely to be much less expensive than improvements for the entire corridor. And we also feel that this change of scope and reduction will dramatically improve the safety at this critical intersection. So for these reasons, the staff recommends approving the requested change of scope. And we to the policy board.
Thank you. Chris, did you want to add?
Yeah, just one note on feedback from Maine DOT. I mean, I think our sense from talking to the department is that they're comfortable with the board moving forward with this request, but would like to do, yes, some additional analysis and feasibility work to determine that the roundabout is viable and it's the best intersection solution for this five-legged intersection. I think we would certainly want to come back to this board following that conversation, and we would also be seeking a formal transportation improvement program amendment to reflect the updated scope of the project.
Okay, Dale, I see your hand raised. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think Chris covered most of it. The only other alternative would be to move forward. I think we certainly see the need for an intersection improvement. All the stuff Elizabeth said earlier about all the stuff that's going on in the corridor. We have some concerns there. There's also just some concerns and will it fit and what are the property impacts? And, you know, because when you start taking entrances and people have no entrance, that's more than just an entrance. So one other alternative might be that the board approves an intersection improvement with a preference of a roundabout, and we'd start the process to work for a PDR to try to get to a roundabout. But if not a roundabout, other options that would meet the same goals. So that's really up to you.
Okay, and Dale, that analysis that you do would include making sure that the metro bus be able to go through there. So if we did bus rapid transit through there, it would be designed in a way where we wouldn't have to redesign it to fit. If the rapid transit was for a bus, it wouldn't have to be redesigned to fit that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's in that memo, both bus, truck. And then, you know, as Elizabeth said earlier, we've worked with PACTS and Portland to do a couple studies in the past, a couple of planning partnership initiatives. And there's a lot of demand out there for bicycle pedestrian connections as well. So, you know, that's a narrow corridor with lots of desires. There are a lot of parallel streets, and we've already started talking to Portland about, you know, how do we use the network instead of just Brighton Avenue to meet all of those needs, because I'm not sure they'll all will meet. And then you get to this intersection and this all has to work as well. So yeah, absolutely. We'd want to look at the whole package in a long-term future. And when we started looking at it, I think BRT will be a little farther along too, which would help us, you know, be able to look a little more seriously at BRT and how it connects with everything else.
Great, thank you. Any other questions before I go to public comment? Yes.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, first policy board meeting, so I'm also catching up on this.
Sure.
But one of my questions is, I'm unclear about, sort of how we got in a situation where the original, proposal was approved while this rapid transit study was going on and not intersecting those two?
Oh, it was approved beforehand. That's how that,
Approved, what was
the project,
before the rapid transit study
Yeah.
was approved?
before we started the rapid transit study.
Yeah, that seems like a kind of a mismatch there.
It was a number of years beforehand, a number of years.
Right, but
You can chime in on that. You guys have been doing a great job, speaking on Portland's behalf anyway, so this is good stuff. Yeah, 2017, this came through as a, just kind of a transformational corridor project. Brighton Ave needs help. Very little actual multimodal features out there, and then signals are dated. Pavements is not good, all that stuff. And then I got on board at that point, but we struggled with enhanced scoping, basically what the cross section of that corridor should look like. So we went back and forth with DOT. We didn't really get to a good point. We had ideas. We certainly did some conceptual designing. We were getting to a place, trying to figure out the numbers, and then the rapid transit study that came about. So we kind of put the brakes on a little bit. Said, hey, we can't really fit everything into this right away. We might need more right away. We don't really know what we need. Let's not get ahead of ourselves too much. So the project was already in the pipeline, and we're trying to figure it out, and then it kind of slowed down a little bit. So this is the best option to kind of focus in on one area and say, hey, let's just do this area. Let's pick this apart. This is one of the major intersections of this corridor. Let's enhance it for all the modes. Let's include rapid transit, whatever. Make sure that can get through there efficiently, and kind of move forward. So just scope and really get this off the books of PACTS that's been on here for a while.
that's helpful, thank you. Yeah, I think my overarching comment is I'm just concerned about narrowing the scope to a project has some pretty major question marks on it with the roundabout, and losing any improvements along that whole. Really been in the works for a really long time, and so to forestall those improvements across the corridor to focus in on one intersection that seems like we don't really know. I have concerns about sort of that process of just, it's gonna further delay any improvements on right.
Will you, Chris, can you pull up the map of the rapid transit?
As do we, and we didn't look at this as precluding the rest of the improvements, but just kind of focusing on this one piece that we can actually get somewhere on at the moment.
Maybe, I mean, we don't know that we can actually get somewhere on that.
There are some concerns I just heard about 2 days ago as well, about the roundabout. It's not designed. I'm not like arguing with any of those concerns. It needs to go through a full design process. It's just a concept on the plan. That's what we desire. And we have modeled it internally. So we do think it'll work, but there needs to be some work done. So I'm with Dale on saying intersection improvements with a preference over roundabouts and moving forward that way.
And Chris, will you remind me the colors on here? That's just the line.
Yeah, these are the different alternatives being considered for rapid transit from Gorham to Portland. And so we're doing a public process right now. So we have not determined the selected alternative, obviously, and this board has not made any approvals yet. But I will say 3 of the 4 do traverse Brighton Avenue, and alternative 3 deviates on Woodford Street, right at that intersection at Rosemont Corner. And 1 and 2 continue on Deering. I'm sorry, on Brighton. 1 then continues all the way to Congress, and the other deviates on Stevens Avenue to Congress.
And Chris, the likelihood of rapid transit there would probably be bus, is my assumption. It doesn't look like a light rail that we would have to space at all without taking a lot of property.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I think high likelihood that it's bus rapid transit, high likelihood that this intersection will be part of the final alternative, I would say. And roundabouts do work pretty well for transit, especially these buses that you see with like an accordion door. They're called articulated buses. They actually have a better turning radius than a traditional bus because of that split. So they're able to navigate roundabouts pretty well.
So I think because Maine DOT knows that we're looking at rapid transit, they're gonna do an analysis of what the plans are to make sure bus in general, but also with that eye of the rapid transit. And Portland is also aware of that. I think that the plans will end up being crafted around that.
And with the rapid transit plan, also address these other corridor improvements, right? That's specific to rapid transit.
Do you mean like a complete street?
Yeah, like other bicycle facilities, pedestrian facilities, ADA compliance along there. Is that part of that rapid transit?
That's the hope. Yeah, the final alternative is that could be, I would say realistically as early as 5 years. But it could be
Right, timeline for
later.
the completion of the study.
Oh, the completion of the study, yeah.
I was like, that's not 5 years.
6 months, 3 to 6 months. Yeah.
And what's the timeline for the analysis of that intersection
This is approved today. I think it's, we start right in on that.
and the scoping and all that would take with Maine DOT and their analysis, probably a few months, right?
It would,
Yeah. So I believe that there's still some timing to get a better understanding of things before anything is an absolute approved done deal. Angela, did you have a question on this one?
Yeah, I did. I guess I can appreciate the fact that Portland is kind of stepping back and looking at holistic, like looking at the corridor, knowing more is coming. And I like the idea that you are trying to move something forward. And so doing this intersection seems to make sense as long as, like you said, you're implementing things that doesn't prohibit the rapid transit on the corridor. But I guess my question is about the timing. So I heard Elizabeth say, so the PDR is expiring in September. Is that why I guess I'm curious why, if it hasn't been flushed out, whether it's a roundabout or whether it's other improvements and that's still happening and DOT needs to weigh in. Why are we voting now without that information? If we're talking about revisiting later, is there a crunch? Is there a reason it has to be like this meeting? I guess my question.
Full disclosure, I just made aware that our PDR expires in September. I know it's been around forever, which is why I'm trying to do something here. We're trying to do something collectively. We have met on this multiple times. PACTS, DOT, City of Portland, try to brainstorm, okay, what can we do to advance this so it doesn't sit on PACTS backlog of complex projects forever. Knowing that that price tag just keeps on coming up as well. It's probably 11 million. I mean, to do what we're actually talking about here is probably more than that now.
Yeah.
So just focus on, still like the focus area. Let's get this done. Let's see what the study comes out and has their recommendations, which is still going to take a while after that to come up with cross sections and recommendations on, the study just recommends our preferred routes and that we should do it. A bunch of other things. It doesn't really dive into the actual impacts to the right of way.
Well, I guess I'm in total agreement with that. I can hear what you're saying, and I appreciate the fact that you're taking this kind of approach. My question is, why wouldn't we want DOT's information and analysis, whether or not a roundabout? I had first initial thought too, looking at the right of way. It seems like right of way is always the big nut to crack in any of these projects, and so you're talking about a lot of that. And then whether or not the right of way the roundabout makes sense there or something else, as Dale is saying. So I guess my question is, should we be waiting for DOT to kind of weigh in on that before we do this vote, or is there a reason why we are in a rush to vote today and then revisit it once DOT has more recommendations or information?
Not in a rush, but Dale, I'll let you.
Yeah, Dale, go ahead.
Sorry.
Oh, you're muted, Dale.
I'll be glad when I never hear those words again, but sorry, I went to the dentist, so I'm probably slurring my words this morning, and that's why I'm not there. I apologize. So the reason is to take the project that was designed to get to PDR, your previous action, put money in that and gave us the authority to use federal funds. So we were doing that, and we've paused because of all the reasons we talked about. Now, this would be refocusing, and I think you can approve just moving into doing that analysis, but we need funding and a win to charge to do that work with Portland and with PACTS. So the reason today is refocusing the project, putting money in a project so that we can start to do those analysis and acquire whatever traffic and right-of-way studies we need to do to be able to come back to an answer for you to be able to make the next decision to move to construction or whatever. Did that answer some of that?
Completely made that clear to me. Thanks.
Great.
You're welcome.
All right, Allison?
So I'm trying to figure out the context more, and my understanding for bus rapid transit projects and for throughput is that a roundabout versus a traffic signal of some kind will have a major impact on sort of the speed with which you could get bus and bus rapid transit through, especially at peak hours. So I'm just struggling to figure out the phasing of deciding on a key intersection which would affect timing before deciding on the bus rapid transit, especially if it seems that the bus rapid transit or corridor planning is to be done very soon. So I was hoping someone could sort of speak to those considerations to help me, wrap my head around it more.
Mike, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, certainly we've seen positive travel time improvements because of the roundabout at Brighton and Deering. I think one thing that will need to be considered as part of the analysis here is a signal option would include a transit signal priority. And so if we're talking about analysis for buses, a signal might be preferred for that one metric. There's obviously other factors, safety of pedestrians and all road users as well. I'm pretty confident that a roundabout would be just fine for us, but yeah, I think a TSP signal might be a little bit better in terms of throughput during peak hours. So I'm happy to let the analysis play out and consider the whole context there.
And just to confirm, Chris, we will see this again.
Yes, yeah, we'll see it again.
Great.
No, so
Yeah.
just process question.
Yeah.
If the board does not approve the reduction in scope, what does happen?
I think if we don't approve it, then that impacts their ability to move forward with any alterations because they need the funding to then continue the analysis of a potential different scenario from what they're currently approved for.
Is there obligation to move forward with the existing plan then, or that's not an obligation? So this would just
Very
mean nothing would
difficult to
happen.
move forward the existing plan until the rapid transit study is complete.
So they could lose the money altogether if they aren't able to move forward with the project that we've approved and we don't approve an alteration to the project, and then they could be out altogether and not be able to do a project, period.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other questions? All right, I am happy to entertain a motion for a scope change and reduction to the Brighton Avenue project.
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Second.
All right. Okay, we have a motion by Keith, a second by Ephraim. Any other discussion? Allison?
Does the motion include the language for Maine DOT and Portland to look at the alternatives? And do we need that specifically in the motion?
It's part of the process that's built in. They will be doing that.
Okay, and will they also, as part of the process, include looking at the pedestrian and bike safety in sort of separated facilities?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, how about a roll call vote, Brian?
Diana Asanda,
Yes.
Angela Benchek,
Yeah.
Allison Burton,
Can I wait to vote and come back to me, please?
Hope Gahan,
Yes.
Aaron Courtney,
Yes.
Jake Daniele,
Yes.
Dale Dowdy.
Yes.
Chad Hyde,
Yes.
Kimberly Irish Starbucks.
Yes.
Mike Tremblay,
Yes.
Christine Gramando,
Yes.
Scott McClellan,
Yes.
Tom Milligan,
Yes.
Ephraim Parashak. Yes. Patricia Quinn,
Yes.
Tom Reinauer,
Yes.
Gene Sidaris,
Yeah.
Matt Sturgis. Yes. And going back to Allison,
Yes, thank you.
motion carries.
Did we miss anybody?
This me and Mr. Rowe. Secret.
All right, did we miss anybody else? Okay, thank you all. That passes. And on to item 8, which is our additional funding for collector paving projects. And Elizabeth is going to lead this one as well.
So this is in regards to 3 PACTS collector paving projects, all within the city of Biddeford. All 3 of these projects were bundled as one and advertised, with one contract. Just a little history. 2 of the projects were approved in September 2021 for 2023 construction, $259,800 to Hill and Landry Streets, $477,400 to Alfred Street. The 3rd project was approved in 2020 for construction in 2022, but the decision was made to delay advertising this project so that it could be bundled with 2 more projects in the hopes of getting better bid prices. And that is the South Street project. The South Street project should be it did receive $175,500 in project funding in 2020. And last fall, Maine DOT added an additional $77,485 to this project because last fall, Maine DOT had decided to fund the deficits in existing projects. So table 8.1 shows the expected project deficits for these 3 projects as construction bids came in, I believe, in May. So as you can see from table 8.1, what we have are the total project funding and the total costs. And I just want to point out that these totals include not only construction costs, but also engineering for design and construction. So 3 costs are bundled into these totals on table 8.1. And as you can see, the right-hand column shows the deficits on these projects, and collectively, it's $219,484. PACTS policy is that communities can come back and ask for an additional 20% of the construction funding that was allocated to these projects. And so table 8.2 shows the construction funding for these projects, which does not include, again, the engineering costs. Your third column will show the 20% of construction funding. So this is the maximum amount under our PACTS policy that a community can request for additional funding. And so what you'll see in the middle column, the budget deficit that matches the numbers shown on table 8.1. The additional requests. So Alfred Street, the additional request just matches the budget deficit, and then that project would not have a deficit, which is less than the 20% of the construction funding. But for the other 2 projects, they are requesting the full 20% because that still wouldn't meet the project deficits for those 2 projects. In the end, with this additional funding request, the the city of Biddeford would still have to come up with an additional $110,809 to meet the deficits on those projects. So the total requested funds, $108,674. 75% of that is PACTS federal funds. Currently, our holding wind balance is $832,248, and that does include the minimum balance that we need to maintain in there of $240,000, and also the $465,333 that was allocated to the Falmouth Route 1 project at the May 23rd Policy Board meeting. So recommendation is to approve following allocations totaling $108,674.83, of which 75% would come from the holding wind and 25% would come from local match. It's $30,534.83 to Alfred Street, $46,780 to Hill and Landry Streets, $31,362 South Street. Thank you.
Elizabeth, for clarification, if we approve this and so subtracting this amount from the holding wind and the Falmouth project amount, how much will be left?
I think I would have done that calculation, but it would be 565,000 minus this 81,000. So that's 550. So a little more than 300,000. We'd still be a little bit above our minimum balance.
A little bit over. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And just as a quick reminder for folks, and for new members that are just joining us today, the holding wind is kind of like a savings account that's replenished when projects are under budget, which is very rare, when projects are canceled, which sometimes happens, or when the policy board intentionally contributes funding from our annual allocation to the holding wind to help build up that savings account or replenish it in certain cases.
Thank you. That's helpful. All right. You know what I'm going to do first, because I think I neglected to do this in the last item, is go into public comment to see if we have any members of the public who want to comment on this. No. Okay, great. Okay.
Okay, I just had one clarifying question. I tried to take a quick look at these streets. I don't believe there's any bike lanes, but I wanted to confirm that any paving would include shoulders.
Yeah, paving is curb to curb.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. I would be happy to entertain a motion for these three projects as described by Elizabeth. Thank you, Matt, for the motion. Thank you, Erin, for the second. Any other discussion? All right, roll call vote, please.
Diana Asanda,
Yes.
Angela Blanchett,
Yes.
Allison Burton,
Yes.
okay,
Yes.
Aaron Courtney,
Yes.
Jake Daniele,
Yes.
Dale Dowdy,
Yes.
Keith Gray. Yes. Gotcha. Chad Hyde,
Yes.
Kimberly Irish Starbucks.
Yes.
Mike Tremblay,
Yes.
Christine Ramondo,
Yes.
Scott LaFlemme,
Yes.
Tom Milligan,
Yes.
Ephraim Parashak. Yes. Patricia Quinn,
Yes.
Tom Reinauer,
Yes.
Dean Sedaris,
Yes.
Matt Sturgis.
Yes.
All right, well, yes, the motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 9, which is some tip amendments. Do we have Harold here? Okay, Chris is going to take this one.
Yeah, I will take it. All right, so as a refresher for folks, the Transportation Improvement Program is a PACTS 4-year kind of slate of our 4-year investment plan, showing all projects that we anticipate funding for, in some cases, planning, design, and construction. So we're currently in our 2023 to 2026 Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP. And periodically, the TIP needs to be amended due to a project changing in scope or significantly changing in budget. That Brighton Avenue project that we just discussed, that will come back to this board for a formal TIP amendment at some point in the future. So we have 2 amendments today that were requested by Maine Department of Transportation. These are projects that they're administering in our region. And they're both paving projects. The first is for a 2024 paving project in Wyndham and Gray on Route 115 and 202. It spans about 8-9 miles, and the total cost is around $3.2 million, with 80% from federal funds, 20% from local funds. The second is a 24 paving project in Scarborough and Gorham. This one's on Route 22 and 114, not too far from Smiling Hill Farm. The project involves the application of a 3/4 inch overlay on Route 22, as well as some treatment on 114. The funding for the project is about $890,000, 80% federal, 20% local. And this one is sourced from the statewide holding win. We just talked about our holding win. This is a statewide holding win that's designated for 2024 light paving or light treatments. I know Dale's with us. Can certainly add any context. Dale, do you want to jump in now, or?
I'd love to. Just to really quickly, the way we manage our light treatments statewide is because, as Tom probably can tell you, pavements change, especially on a light treatment. And so we set all our light treatments the previous year into a holding win. We don't select them until the summer of the previous year. So the way that works with us is that that win, that holding win, is stepped programmatically. And when we assign those projects for the rest of the state, we simply send Federal Highway a notice. We don't have to do a step amendment. We just do an addendum. But when we did our programmatic agreement with Federal Highway a number of years ago, working with a previous PACTS board and all 4 of the MPOs, anything we do inside the MPOs needs a TIP and STIP amendment because it needs to go through this board. So this is routine. I think I talked last time about us focusing a little more on arterials inside of urban areas. This is the beginnings of, not the beginning of that, but these are a consequence of those. And these light treatments are really intended to catch that treatment so it doesn't become a heavy treatment that we have to program in the future. So this is programmatic. We're doing these all over the state right now. Probably 3-4 weeks ago, we sent Chris and staff a list of ones we were considering inside of PACTS to get any feedback prior to today. So.
Dale, at the last meeting, we talked about having a bit of a more robust presentation in our agenda packets of requests for TIP. I'm wondering if
this one came from across the hall and it stuck by me. So we will be doing more of that in the future. Okay. I apologize.
And Dale, just for our new folks, remind us what happens if the PACTS board does not approve something into a TIP?
If the PACTS board doesn't approve it into a TIP, it does not get into our STEP. And remember, I said these are set aside. These would have to go into our STEP because it's inside of PACTS. Therefore, they just wouldn't move forward. And if you don't do them now, maybe the second question is, do I need to do them today or can I do them later? The reason we do them this time of year is as people come out of the field in the next couple of months, they'll be designing these, working through complete streets and all of the other elements that go into these to advertise them during the winter to get good prices to build them next summer. So if you don't approve it, it doesn't move forward. If you don't approve it now or in the next meeting, it just delays design, and then advertising would be later in the year, next year, and could have a price impact. So those are the 2 elements.
And then Dale, the reason why it can't move into this STIP or then move forward is because then it can't get the funding it needs?
Yeah, so everything inside the PACS area has to be within your tip and has to be within our STIP. That's a federal regulation. So any federal highway funding or FTA funding needs to be incorporated in both. You have the ability to incorporate things by line item. We have the ability to grab your whole tip and then, you know, the governor, it says the governor, but it's really the commissioner, and incorporate it in. So inside the MPO, it requires both. Stuff that doesn't have either one of those doesn't move forward, so. Or
Great,
can't
thank
achieve federal funding, yeah,
Thank you. Just wanted to highlight that that's really.
Yeah,
the-
important, yeah,
For unlocking those, access to those federal funds.
yeah.
And state funds, right?
And just
And
real
back to
quick,
your point, Hope, the more we talk ahead of time, that we don't get there, right? So I think your point earlier that we need to provide you information, and when you have tip amendments like the one or one we're gonna be doing on Brighton, the more we talk, the more those things move through both processes smoothly. So we completely agree with you.
Thank you.
really quickly, the amendment was posted for a 10-day public comment period on June 23rd. We did not receive any public comments on this. Although I know we're going to go to public comment on the meeting in a second.
Should we also, I apologize, just talk more that light treatments do extend the quality and lifetime of pavements for folks who aren't familiar with that. That's really important, and it's important to do them at the right time rather than continue to push them off because they're not as effective if not done at the right time. So
Do you, I remember that there's a specific breakdown, like if you do it early, then there's this amount, and then if you wait, then it's like 80% more expensive or something. Do you remember that?
I don't have the exact numbers with me today. I'm sure Dale and I could coordinate something and get some information out to folks, but depending on the treatment, there are many different kinds that you can apply. Pavement's actually quite fascinating. And so, yeah, applying at the right time, not too early, but not too late is a really effective way of extending the lifespan of your pavement. It reduces carbon emissions, makes it more enjoyable for pedestrian use, so on and so forth. So Dale, I'm sure you have something, an infographic or something really simple.
We do, and and anything we give you will be kind of, you know, a little bit tongue in cheek because every pavement is different. And you guys experience that all the time. But yes, it is sometimes an order of 10, or an order of 10. So absolutely.
Yep.
Chris, I'm wondering if we could just get something that's very simple, that can be added to any of the paving projects, just at the end for the public, for new members, so that it's right there and very easy to understand and gives that understanding of why it's so important to catch these early.
So we're all on the same page, especially if we're voting on, or folks are, I'm not a voting member, but yeah, it's important for sure.
Chris, I'll talk to Andy. We'll see if we can, you and I can work on something. How's that?
That sounds great.
Real simple.
Thank you. Angela?
I had a question for Dale. Is the light treatment, it's its own animal, I guess, or different than, I guess what I'm asking is the collector road paving, when you guys put out to bid as a lump together, it could be multiple communities that they kind of have to all go together or they're all not going. This is not like that, right? Are these each, like, are we tied to Wyndham, I guess is my question? Or is this separate?
So what we will look at, our project manager will look at, are there a couple adjacent to each other in a similar fashion, and are there unique pavements, and could those go together, or is there a time when those could go? So contract capacity, all of those things. This isn't individually that way, but we will look at bundling. You know, that's more the LCP kind of stuff, but we will look at bundling if it makes sense for mobilization. And one of these is 3/4 inch overlay. The other one's a light bonded wearing treatment, which is a specialty played with a specialty machine. So I could see that one looking at other possibilities of bundling together. I don't know that they're going to, but that's something they'll look at as they go through the design, because it is a specialty machine. It is limited in contracted capacity, but they do look at all those.
Ron, do we have any public comment? And I'll give just a second for people to raise their hands in case they wanted to make comment or ask questions from the public. Okay, great. Yes, Matt.
Quick question, Dale. and it's out of my own ignorance, so I apologize for that, but on the light bonding, is there a milling that goes on with that? And then you will go over that with light, or is it just a full straight up overlay?
It's an overlay, but it's a high-tech overlay. It's a fairly thin overlay. That's why it's a light treatment. But it has, in certain structural conditions, there's a benefit to this light bonding wearing. And the other thing with these light treatments, you're trying to limit, for bicycles, pedestrians, everyone, trying to put the right treatment that's quick, relatively inexpensive, but matches up with things like catch basins, doesn't overwhelm curbing. So some of the considerations of them are, what's the best not only light treatment's the best treatment, but what's the best treatment given the type of degradation, and are we going to be able to pass everyone safely?
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Same question, just confirming this is full length and include the shoulders, but I think, yeah, what you just mentioned covers that. Yeah.
We have a shoulder paving policy. They will, and unless there's a reason they've been paved another way and they don't need it, but if they need it, they will. Yes.
Okay, I don't think we have a motion yet. And so.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
All right, we love enthusiasm for this one.
Chair's choice.
Okay, so Angela motion, Keith second. Oh, Ephraim, it was Ephraim?
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna give it to Ephraim then. Okay, any discussion before we take a roll call vote? Yes.
I'm really glad to see that 202 section getting paved. So.
Me too.
All right.
I've ridden my bike over there, and I'm glad I made it home.
Oh my gosh, okay. All right, well, good. Good that we're moving this forward. Okay, let's do a roll call vote.
Diana Asanta,
Yes.
Angela Blanchett,
Yes.
Allison Burton,
Yes.
Hope Cahan,
Yes.
Aaron Courtney,
Yes, we'll make sure Mac is home.
Yes.
Thanks, Aaron.
Jake Daniele,
Yes.
Dale Dowdy,
Yes.
Keith Gray. Yes. Chad Hyde,
Yes.
Kimberly Irish Starbucks. Back. Mike Tremblay.
Yes.
Mike. Christine Ramondo,
Yes.
Scott LaFlemme,
Yes.
Tom Milligan,
Yes.
Ephraim Parashak. Yes. Patricia Quinn,
Yes.
Tom Reinauer,
Yes.
Dean Sedaris,
Yes.
Matt Sturgis.
Yes.
With that, the motion carries.
Okay, our next item is the one that Tom described from the RTAC meeting, and that's the board structure review governance research. Ron, I believe you're gonna lead this one for us?
Yes. Up here.
There'll be some overlap on this presentation as well as the next item, from what you heard in the recording that I sent out to policy board members from our prior RTAC meeting. But we tried to streamline these presentations a bit, condense them a bit, to be particularly sensitive to folks that are on RTAC and the policy board, reduce redundancy and some input we've heard and suggestions we've heard from folks.
So as Hope and Tom mentioned, we're presenting on some board committee structure research that staff conducted. So to provide a bit of background, at the December 15th meeting, the PACTS Policy Board instructed staff to investigate concerns that were not previously addressed during the funding framework task force process and to bring those findings back to the transit task force. The concerns raised by several transit operators during that process were that transit agencies were inadequately represented on RTAC and the policy board, and that the roles and responsibilities of the policy board versus those of the executive board are not clearly articulated. And as mentioned previously, these findings were presented to the Transit Task Force back on July 6th, and also to RTAC on July 11th.
This research was done in two parts, first by consulting national resources and publications for key takeaways, and second, identifying case study organizations used to draw conclusions from based on current board structures of MPOs across the country. So a summary of those national resources. Staff conducted national resources and publications related to MPO governance. Key findings include that roughly half of MPO governing bodies include at least one transit representative. Of the MPOs with one transit representative, transit represents no more than 10% of total board composition. So it's important to note that this research predates the recent PACTS board restructuring. Transit representation makes about 20% of policy board's composition currently. And additionally, 13% of MPO governing bodies allow for weighted voting. So looking at the case studies, so staff developed a methodology to identify 11 case study organizations to use for the second part of this research. As you can see from this map, the location of each case study ranges from as north as New Hampshire to as south as Georgia to as west as California. Also, the size of each case study region ranges from as large as Washington, D.C. to as small as Olympia, Washington. And so summarizing this research, based on our evaluation of 11 case studies, we found the median number of voting members on a governing body was 20. We also found that the median number of transit voting members was 1, which makes up a 5% share of total sum of votes. As you can see in the chart on the right here, the median composition of a governing body includes a majority stakeholder of municipal representatives and 1 transit operator. You also take notice that county government is represented in some of these charts. In many states, municipalities are often subordinate to county government. In Maine, we have home rule, so it's not necessary in our case, but across the country, it's quite popular. This slide depicts the current PACTS policy board composition based on representatives compared to that of our case studies. As you can see by the charts, the distribution among municipal and county representatives is quite similar, while our PACTS policy board has more specialist seats, and the median case studies show less transit representation overall. And so summarizing advisory committees, based on our evaluation of 11 case studies, we found that the median number of voting members on an advisory committee was 33. We also found that the median number of voting members on an advisory committee was 3, which makes up a 9% share of the total sum of votes. And similar to the previous slide, this chart shows the median advisory committee composition, which includes a majority stake of municipal representatives and 3 transit operators. And as mentioned, previous to similar slide, this slide compares the current PACTS RTAC composition to our median case study advisory committees. You can see that the composition is quite similar in comparison. And so some high-level takeaways as a result of this research. So we found at the governing body results, the board on average has around 20 members with 1 transit representative. Not all municipal and transit operators may be represented. The transit representative may have to collaborate with multiple agencies, or municipal reps may have to be represented by sub-regional or county seats. We found that in some instances. Also, the transit representative tends to be from an agency with the highest ridership. So if there's more than one in a region, it's typically based on ridership for representation. And also, representation is not typically decided by mode. And however, on the advisory level, we found that municipalities are strongly represented. There's a more regional, county, and state representation than at the governing body level. So there's a larger board, there's more people. There's a similar percentage of specialists and transportation adjacent sectors represented compared to RTAC. This goes back to the previous point that RTAC and the median advisory committee have similar distribution of members. There's also less transit representation compared to RTAC. And moving into weighted voting, so per PACTS bylaws, policy board votes are weighted based on municipal representation, or I'm sorry, municipal population. Of the 11 case studies evaluated, we found 3 that implements a weighted voting mechanism. 1 of the 3 always uses weighted voting, and 2 of the 3 have mechanisms in place where 1 or more of members of the governing body can request the use of weighted voting on any item. And so PACTS policy and executive boards. So prior to the PACTS committee restructuring, the PACTS policy committee met infrequently, roughly 3 or 4 times a year, while the PACTS executive committee met monthly. In response to the feedback from members, the policy and executive boards generally meet every other month. However, major project milestones, policy decisions, and other significant topics often benefit from the input of a larger, more inclusive policy board, which results in executive board meetings being canceled in favor of additional policy board meetings. Additionally, large project milestones and other significant topics often benefit in Additionally, large project milestones and other significant topics often result in executive board meetings being canceled in favor of adding policy board meetings. And as a result, the executive board often has fewer items to address, which makes those advantages of having a separate body dedicated to items that are administrative and time sensitive in nature possibly diminished. Further, the relatively arbitrary distinction between items which are administrative and time sensitive in nature and those which are not can lead to confusion over the roles and responsibilities of the two bodies. Additionally, this distinction is not defined in the bylaws. Initial bylaws considerations are illustrated on page 30 of the packet. Moving into feedback we got from RTAC. So members of RTAC asked questions pertaining to transit representation and informed weighted voting. And to that, staff identified 2 of the 3 organizations having transit representative weighted voting, both agencies having 1 vote. And of the 3 case studies identified that used weighted voting, jurisdictional population was the most recurring element used to balance votes. As I mentioned, there's more information on that that's available in your packet on page 29. We also heard from RTAC that members had questions about the similarities and differences between PACTS, RTAC, and other advisory committees. The RTAC distribution of seats is similar to peer agencies when those peer agencies advisory committees are evaluated as a whole, as seen on table 10-3 on page 28 of the packet. However, RTAC is structurally different from most of the peer agencies in that it brings together different perspectives and areas of expertise under one advisory committee. However, staff did identify 3 of the 11 case study organizations having an advisory committee, which members resemble that of RTAC. So that's sort of similar sort of distribution. There's also discussion about the potential trade-offs associated with additional research if deemed necessary by the policy board. Staff indicated that additional research directed by the policy board might require other work being postponed that's being programmed in the current Unified Planning Work Program or UPWP. Which brings us to our recommended action, which is the item is for information discussion. However, if desirable, create a small working group of policy board members, 5 to 7 individuals appointed by the chair to provide additional clarity on the roles and responsibilities of the executive board and the policy board and recommend any structural changes.
In short, based on the recommendations from the Funding Framework Task Force and the direction from the policy board, we had kind of 2 roles in doing this research. One is to look into the concern that transit agencies are inadequately represented on RTAC and policy board. The second was to clarify the roles and responsibilities of the executive board and policy board. We feel like we were able to achieve the first with the research that we provided. The second piece, we feel like we dug in a little bit. We're like, well, our bylaws are maybe a little squishy on the roles and responsibilities between these 2 boards and could benefit from additional clarity, which is why we included this more specific kind of action to look at if the board wants us to look at it.
Okay. Before we go into the discussion, let's see if there are any members of the public who would like to comment on this.
Seeing none.
Okay, great. Bring it back to the board for discussion. So this is an informational item. We can give direction to create a small group to look at the board policies, to see if there are any changes that should be made, or we could just decide everything's fine as it is and we'll just move on to the next item then. So are there any questions? Any ideas? Yeah.
I guess my question is to staff, and I know you're putting this forward as it can be considered. I guess my question is, in what you guys do operationally, is there something you're finding you're missing that you need from this group? Because I don't want to create another little subcommittee just to create a subcommittee. But if you're finding really we need this answered, that's a different conversation than we're fine doing the way we've been doing it.
Yeah.
I don't know, I thought I put you on the spot.
No, it's okay. Happy to answer it. I think there's there's 2 pieces. One track is a lighter lift in I do think that the bylaws could benefit from some additional clarity. Staff would be more than happy to, draft recommendations and like a track change version of the bylaws for the board's consideration. That would be a pretty light lift. The bigger lift would be if the policy board, if you all feel like there's maybe potential or a need to restructure executive board and policy board, as an example, that would be different. We've heard input from members, and I won't put them on the spot, that the executive board sometimes feels like it doesn't have a true role and that the policy board could theoretically meet every single month. As an example, that would require obviously a group to kind of like dig in and think about it a lot more. Our team would not be ready to provide recommendations on that.
So is there interest in having staff look at the bylaws to see if there's some tweaks that they recommend, and then they could just bring those back? Yes.
I just had one question. I don't know what within the bylaws about term limits for each of the different committees. Like, does RTAC have term limits for each person, or do we have term limits? That's something I'm not sure of. That would be.
Yeah, okay. It's inconsistent the way the bylaws are written. Certain seats have term limits. The chair and vice chair have term limits for policy board, but technically, I don't think they do at RTAC, although we've been kind of practicing that as an extension of the policy board. So that's an example. So we could definitely look at that.
I would just think for if there was some of the community member seats like on those, somebody for RTAC, if someone was just to sit in it forever, that doesn't give anybody an opportunity for like fresh ideas. So if there were term limits, that might help keep it reinvigorated.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that's something that we should have a small group look at?
I guess it would be helpful to know what the differences are between which one, like each committee, like if staff could provide us what it is for each, and then we could see if we need to meet on it, or if it's something we could just have a agenda item on.
Yeah.
So maybe just have staff take a first look at it, bring back some recommendations, and then see if we think there needs to be a little more digging.
Yeah, that's where I start.
Okay. Matt, were you?
I like that approach.
Okay. Tom?
Yeah, just sort of a counter to that, although I'm not forcibly countering that. When we look at the history of PACTS before RTAC was formed, even the policy committee, when we were trying to get local representatives to come, as opposed to, I'll call it city staff, no one wanted to participate. We got them to go to one meeting and then they never showed up. So for the sake of continuity, maybe term limits aren't necessarily the best way to go. This stuff, those of us who have been on it for a while, and I guess I'm one of them, it's not all that straightforward. It takes several years to really get into the process, understand some of the nuances, and I have to admit, even I'm not fully up to speed on several of the areas. So I guess I would be concerned that we couldn't get enough people that would really want to stick to it. And maybe times are changing and people's philosophies are changing. I don't know, but that would be a concern that I would have. Thanks.
Okay, Christine.
Yeah, I want to, I just want to note, I feel like, you're in a room with people who spend a lot of time on committees when people say, maybe we don't need another committee just yet. And I think, but I think that I want to echo that the idea that maybe we don't need that just yet, but hearing staff's reflection on what some of those potential changes could be sounds like a better use of time at this stage. I also just want to say I appreciate the robustness of this response. I enjoyed the presentation. I think it was showed a real responsiveness to the concern raised, and not only I hope answered some of those concerns, but gave us something to chew on and shows an ability to be reflective on some of these questions. So I just wanted to say good job. Thanks.
Any other questions? Oh, Christina.
And Christine, I just want to appreciate that you said that. Thank you. I know our team's been working hard on it. And going back to Angela's original question about what staff needs, I think, you know, we've had this structure in place for, I don't know, maybe 2 years now. Is that right, Chris? It hasn't been that long since we restructured PACTS. And so I think it makes sense for staff to kind of comb through the bylaws and look for things that are inconsistent or that we need to look for national research to, and then come back to you with some thoughts about some minor tweaks. I mean, unless there's anything that you've seen in this research that you think requires structural change, I would prefer to do a light lift, just because there's so much work that we've got planned in this UPWP with the UPWP amendment from this year, and then with the 24-25 UPWP. So hopefully that's something that staff can do, like with our little pinky finger, and not have to take up a lot of more committee time and a lot of staff time.
Your hand is raised, but I'm wondering if that's left over. Okay, I'm going to assume that's past hand. All right. Any other questions? Yeah.
I guess I do agree that there's no need to form another group to look at this. I mean, as one of the people who is on the committee to kind of deal with the restructuring to begin with, I remember one of the goals was to streamline meetings, and I'm not quite sure we're there. But I think to keep looking at it would be a great thing and eliminate some redundancy. And back to the comments about, you know, term limits and people, that many agencies only have a really small group of people that are even eligible to show up at these things. And so it's a lot. And so just to keep that in mind, but I think looking at the bylaws and always looking at ways to tweak things and make sure we're optimizing is a great idea. I also just, and this is the second or third time I've heard the presentation and appreciate the research just as much as I did the first time. No, it's, you know, it's great. And you know, you did good work in here, but I also just want to mention, and maybe for some of the new people, that the reason we got here is that there, you know, there was a situation a couple of years ago where there were some funds for transit agencies that were allocated, in ways that the transit agencies were in opposition to, and caused some hardship to some of the transit agencies, and we kind of got, you know, some got outnumbered. And so I think some other steps have been taken in the meantime with the transit task force to help strengthen that body and improve that process. But just don't want to lose sight of that there was a reason that this happened, because the structure on paper works, but in practice in a situation really had some negative impacts on some of the transit agencies and their riders. And so we just want to be mindful to avoid that in the future and learn from that experience and those lessons, and make the group stronger and wiser and more efficient going forward.
Yes. I would just like to say, I appreciate that we moved to having the policy meetings every other month rather than trying to cram them in quarterly and then going 3 hours for each meeting. So I think it's been beneficial to have more meetings and keep them to the time. Right.
All right, seeing no other hands raised, we'll have staff come back with their recommendations at their earliest opportunity. And appreciate you putting that all together for us.
Yeah, thank you, Ron.
Now we're on item 11, which is the 2024 to 2025 Unified Planning Work Program, the UPWP. And I forgot who was running that. Chris, are you?
That's me. I was going to do slides. I'll walk us through it and hopefully we can end on time. So Unified Planning Work Program, it's hard to believe we're almost in August of 2023. So we're thinking about 2024 and 2025 and the Unified Planning Work Program for those calendar years. So the 24-25 Unified Planning Work Program, or UPWP, will run January 1st of 2024 to December 31st of 2025. It's a federal requirement and it kind of spells out our planning priorities for that 2-year period. Go ahead, Ron. So a little bit more on it. I mentioned federal requirement, only eligible for planning. We can't use UPWP for design, engineering, construction, but part of planning, it goes to, the funding can go to staff time at GPCOG, can also go to data collection, procurement, consultant assistance, community engagement. So there's a lot that can be done with these funds. If it's funded through federal, state, and local sources, we'll look at the breakdown in a minute. It's 2 years in PACTS case. We estimate the budget for the 24-25 UPWP to 3.5 to 4 million. Again, 80% federal, 10% state, 10% local. And so we're not ready to have the conversation about local match yet. We'll get there. So today is more focused on the content and substance of the UPWP. And once that dollar amount is kind of refined, we'll be able to come back and talk about that as well. Got some great federal and state guidance out there that can guide and direct our UPWP. The federal partners have planning factors. There's 10, those are in your packet. And there's also new federal planning emphasis areas that came out in the last couple of years. And there's 8 of those also documented in your packet. And then the state's got some fresh plans to refer to, the family of plans, which include their flagship long-range transportation plan, Maine Won't Wait, the state's climate action plan, and then Maine DOT's complete streets policy can all kind of work together to guide our planning investments. Go ahead. We've got a lot of great input from the region, not mentioned on this slide. Well, it is mentioned, but you have a separate slide, a separate call out for Connect 2045, because that's kind of our playbook. That's our long-range transportation plan. And the investments and planning priorities in the UPWP should be aligned with that long-range transportation plan. We've done some recent outreach to committee and board members, really going back to fall of 2022. We did a notice of funding for the UPWP in anticipation for additional funding in the current UPWP, as well as funding for the 24-25 UPWP. So we got some plans and studies that were suggested by communities. We did a planning survey in February and March of 23, asking folks to rank the relative importance of the Connect 2045 action to help us prioritize some of these initiatives and concepts, knowing that we can't do everything in the 2-year period that we want to do. And then most recently in June, we did another survey where we got some really good feedback on planning priorities from RTAC and policy board members, and ask communities and transit agencies, do you have other needs, other municipal or agency sponsored plans and studies that you'd like to see advance in this next UPWP? We took all that information and yeah, you can go ahead. We took all that information, kind of boiled some concepts, draft concepts down into 4 buckets. We did a deep dive with RTAC on that, as many of you probably saw in the recordings. We won't take that deep dive today. Happy to answer any questions about these, but broadly these 4 categories. And so this first category, coordinate, engage, and evaluate. This is satisfying federal requirements. We've got a federal certification coming up in 2024. These are every 4 years. So we'll be working with our federal partners on that. Data collection is part of this bucket. Public engagement is part of it. So our community transportation leaders program, we envision funding that through this first category bucket. And then regional educational training opportunities. We heard from one community that it'd be great to have a 2-day intensive seminar on roundabout design. We talked about roundabouts earlier. And so we polled Maine DOT staff and some communities from around the region to see if they'd be interested, and there was a lot of interest. So that's something that we're hoping to recommend investing in as part of this effort. Be the project pipeline. focuses on project delivery, making sure projects are advancing in the timely fashion, especially on the Federal Highway Administration side. But some of the transit projects that are more regional in nature as well. And also focuses on working collaboratively with Maine Department of Transportation to advance projects and select projects for the Transportation Improvement Program we talked about earlier. And then readying the region for other discretionary grant opportunities are a couple of things I would highlight. This next one, plan for the future. There's some municipal sponsored studies baked into this one. Wyndham has an active transportation plan that they'd like to see funded through the UPWP. Yarmouth and Scarborough have some complete streets work that they'd like to see funded. Standish has a park and ride that they want to analyze and do a feasibility study on. So some of that's included in this. There's also some more regional efforts. We got feedback from town city managers in the Safe Streets for All grant process and some of the discussions with managers. And one thing that came out of that was a suggestion to look at Route 1 and really take a more corridor management kind of level focus on that corridor and not necessarily break it up into smaller segments and do a bunch of different piecemeal corridor analyses, but really look holistically at complete streets on Route 1. So that would be, that's baked into these concepts that we drilled into in a little bit more detail with RTAC, and that's shown in your packet. Some additional work on vulnerability of our transportation system to climate-induced weather events, and work on housing choice to really help hopefully our communities in planning, zoning, transportation initiatives and priority centers that are at PACT 2045. So we can really understand the opportunities and constraints in those areas and think a little bit more holistically about different funding opportunities. So if a community wants to reconstruct a roadway, and there's also a need to expand broadband in that area, we should be connecting these dots and thinking about the different funding streams and different funding levers that we can pull to make that project a reality. Last one, implement plans and studies. I'd highlight three here. There's work that needs to be done on implementing our complete streets policy that was approved by the policy board a couple months back. Vision Zero as well. We have a Vision Zero action plan. Now we gotta get to work and implementing that. And then Transit Together is certainly a big one where we have 40 or so recommended action steps that came out of Transit Together that require continuous work and attention to make sure that that plan is moving forward and not just sitting on the shelf. Next slide. Got some really good feedback from RTAC questions and input. I won't go into all of these. They're documented in your packet. I will say that that first one, folks are particularly curious about, will the 2020 census urban areas, which could change PACTS's geography and really the geographies of the other MPOs as well in the state, the other three, could that impact our UPWP funding? And the answer is yes. PACTS, the Kittery area comprehensive transportation, is growing considerably and they're gaining 4 or 5 new communities. So with that, they'll have maybe a greater share of population than they once did, and we'll have a slightly lower share. And so our levels may go down from the current UPWP. That's why we gave that range of like 3.5 to 4 million. So we're working with Maine DOT and the other MPOs on that process now to see how the funding levels will shake out. So we do expect to carry over rollover funding to the next UPWP. And then I know Hank Berg had a question at RTAC about 5307 transit formula funding, and whether those planning efforts documented from 5307 should be in our UPWP. I believe I answered no. I don't think they do need to be. Upon further research, I think it's probably prudent to include those to show that we're holistically thinking about them, even if they're not directly funded through the UPWP. See that there's a lot of priority for feeding the project pipeline, implementing plans and studies. And we've got some other specific feedback about the importance of data collection, analysis, reporting, the housing work and tying it to transportation, and then implementation of Transit Together. Next slide. Just the schedule. So we're talking about draft concepts right now. We'll work over the next couple months to put together a draft UPWP for review, hopefully in September. that will have dollar amounts assigned to specific projects, programs, studies for RTAC consideration, policy board consideration, and then we'll do the 30-day public comment period on the UPWP on the draft, and then hopefully bring it to you all in October. And if that timeline doesn't work, we've got maybe a little bit of wiggle room to get it approved in November. So we just want to know from you, there's no recommended action today, but do you need a clarification on any of these broader categories or buckets or any of the concepts that are detailed in your packet? Should we consider removing anything? Are we missing anything? Are we kind of generally on the right track? And that's what we're hoping to accomplish today.
Thank you, Chris. Ron, let's first go over to public comment and see if there are any members of the public who want to comment on this.
See none.
Great. All right, we'll come back to the board. Any questions or direction that you want to offer up as they're working on that draft?
I just have a question, and I'm not sure if this is an appropriate place for it, but and how municipalities and agencies are handling this, but is workforce development a topic that could be considered as part of this as well to help everybody get the people they need to make things actually happen?
So
Throwing it out there.
great question. I think we'd want to chat with our federal partners about the eligibilities of the UPWP and whether we can use those funds for that type of purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take a look into that. I'm personally all about holistic planning. I think that is no nonsense, and it's the only way to move forward with a lot of these improvements, but I'll get some solid answers too shortly.
Thanks, Mitch.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? All right, looks like we've got things covered pretty well.
All right, we assume we're on the right track. Thank you.
That's what we actually looks like on the right track, is really moving forward, and I like to see this evolution.
Yeah.
Really good to see from start to where we are now, so well done.
Thank you.
Great. Our next item is other business. Anybody have any other business or announcements they want to throw in there?
I'll just say one.
Yeah.
So the Bicycle Coalition of Maine, we now have a fleet of 10 e-bikes that we can use for demonstration projects, test rides. If we're looking to connect with decision makers, stakeholders, city governments, all over the state. So if anyone is ever interested in having a few e-bikes, take out on a little ride and sort of see how they could be part of the transportation, particularly workforce transportation, please kind of.
Great. Okay.
Jean, do you have staff available to go and like lead a community ride?
Yes,
Okay.
they would be led by, our certified instructors, safety and either, lead a ride or let me go take a bike out for a bit,
Thank you.
all across the state.
Yeah.
Hey, Jean, I had Jim Tassi was on our radio show a couple shows ago, and he and I chatted about bringing those 10 e-bikes to a PACTS policy board meeting so that after the policy board, we could all go out on a ride. Is that something that we might be able to arrange?
They actually rode one here, so if anyone
Nice.
wants to, in the parking lot right now. Yeah, no, that would be great. We'd love to do that.
Great. All right. Mike?
Yeah, just think by the time this board meets again, Metro will have implemented our some of our ARPA funded service improvements, including, sorry about the noise there, including extension of the Husky Line to Ocean Gateway terminal area and improvements on frequency on the Route 9 and on the Breeze. So just the first phase of our service improvements, but I just wanted to keep you guys posted on that and catch the bus down to Commercial Street sometime this fall.
Thanks, Mike. Any other announcements? Will those bikes be usable in the winter as well, or are they really more?
No, they're
Fall.
pretty fat tires, very easy to ride, very comfortable bikes. We'll have them, and I think we have them at least through the end of the year, longer. We're expecting to do this for several years.
Great. Okay, thank you. Okay, and our next executive board meeting is on Tuesday, August 22nd. And there's a RTAC meeting on September 5th, 9 a.m. That executive board meeting on August 22nd is also at 9. And the next policy board meeting is September 21st at 11. So that's the one where you can come and get lunch.
Really
selling it. I'm really.
And that executive board meeting in August might be, the agenda might be really light, might just be a tip amendment on there. So if that's the case, we'll probably go full remote and won't have folks make the trip for it.
Yeah, great. Okay. No lunch for that one, but they're often donuts. I don't know if there'd be donuts for just one item or not.
Donut hall.
Yeah, donut hall. There we go. Love it. Okay. All right. And now 12:38, we'll call the meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.